The President had a meeting with administration officials here on Sunday for a couple hours, including Secretary Hagel. So how come the Pentagon then came out with a different policy for some of its troops who are in West Africa? And isn't that the kind of thing that someone like Ron Klain should be coordinating within the government?
Ron Klain is responsible for coordinating our whole of government response to the Ebola situation. He has performed very well in that task. The President and everyone here at the White House who has a role in working on this effort is appreciative of the kind of management expertise that he's bringing to this challenge, and that the impact of his work is already being felt both here at the White House but across the government. As it relates to this specific policy, I don't think it's a particular surprise to anybody who understands that it's not uncommon for the policy that's implemented for civilians to be different than a policy that's implemented for our military service personnel. That's not unusual. And that takes a variety of forms. In this case, we're talking about a policy that's still under consideration, I might add, by the Secretary of Defense. So I don't want to suggest that that I'm getting ahead of any sort of policy announcement that's made by the Department of Defense. But the policy that is evidently under consideration is one that would restrict the movements of service personnel that had been working in West Africa. And this illustrates the kind of different challenges that our civilian governments are dealing with and the challenge that our military is dealing with. When we're talking about our civilian government, or our civilians, and what sort of policy is in place to monitor the health of healthcare workers who are returning from West Africa, we're talking about a couple of dozen of healthcare workers a week who are returning to this country from West Africa. When we're talking about military personnel, we're talking about thousands of military service members who have been or will be deployed to West Africa to carry out the mission that the President ordered. It simply will be easier to directly and actively monitor their health if their movements are restricted to certain locations. We're talking about thousands of military personnel that are traveling from bases all across the globe. In order to monitor their health, it simply is easier to do that if their movements are restricted and they're all co-located. Now, the other thing that is important for us, I think, at this point to acknowledge is that this is indicative of the kinds of sacrifices that our military service members make on a daily basis. That there are a wide range of sacrifices that our men and women in uniform make for the sake of efficiency and for the sake of uniformity and for the success of our military. So to take a more pedestrian example than the medical one that we're talking about, there might be some members of the military who think that the haircut that's required may not be their best. But that's a haircut that they get every couple of weeks because it is in the best interest of their unit and it maintains unit cohesion, and that is a policy of the military. And that obviously is a situation in which application of military policy is not or is necessarily different than the application of the policy in a civilian context.
But we're not talking about haircuts. We're talking about the outbreak of a disease here that has deadly implications.
Of course we're not. And I'm not trying to suggest that it's somehow unimportant. I think it is a useful illustration, though, that the kinds of sacrifices that our men and women make in uniform range from very simple, elemental things like a haircut to more serious things like medical quarantine. But the fact of the matter is those are the kinds of things that have an impact on their day-to-day personal convenience, but yet they make those sacrifices for the benefit of the broader military.